Sessions is from the courthouse to the State House, fighting for trans lives. Before I introduce our moderator and panelists, in order to save time, we provided bios on all moderators, speakers, and panelists to our guests, and those joining us online can view each speaker's bio on LULAC.org/Pride Summit. First, we have our moderator, Francisco Salcedo Jr., currently resides in San Antonio, Texas, where he contributes to the field of higher education as a certified academic advisor at North Vista College. Francisco has also been a member of LULAC 22198 Orgullo de San Antonio for almost a decade and has served as acting president since 2020. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Our first panelist is Alexa Elizabeth Rodriguez, originally from El Salvador. Alexa's passion is defending the rights of transgender people and people living with HIV. She is the director of Translatina DMV, a two-spirit-led organization that centers on the needs of Black and Indigenous Translatinus people living in Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. Thank you, Alexa, for joining us today. Next, second panelist is Sasha Buchert, a senior attorney in the Washington, D.C. office of Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest organization dedicated to advancing the civil rights of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and individuals with HIV. During her time at Lambda Legal, Buchert has been involved with extensive federal, state, and legislative and policy efforts on a wide range of issues, including judicial nominations, criminal justice reform policy, and healthcare initiatives. Thank you for joining us today, Sasha. And the panel panelist is Rodrigo Heng-Lehtinen. I may have mispronounced the last name.
No worries.
Heng-Lehtinen, the executive director of the National Center for Transgender Equality. He is a transgender policy advocate, policy advocacy and messaging expert. As a Cuban American, openly transgender man, his wide-ranging experience in the LGBTQ movement has covered field organizing, leadership development, fundraising, and media advocacy. Thank you for joining us, Rodrigo.
And now, our content board Gabriel, and at the same time.
Hi, thank you, first of all, for being here, and thank you to Jesse for setting up such a great panel. I do want to respect everyone's time, and I want to give you all the most time of it, to answer these questions. So we'll go ahead and get started with Alexa. So our first question is, what is the current status of transgender rights? Are we better or worse off after the 2022 midterm elections?
Tough questions. Hi, everyone. I'm not good at politics or policies. To be honest, I'm very busy fighting for the rights of trans women, especially immigrants, undocumented, and even with HIV like myself. And not only for the policies and politics, but also from the social, the people, the families that protect our siblings and community, religion, and also some friends. So it's very hard to put some minds in think in politics. Like I've never been in politics, not even in my country. I was sharing with some friends that I have been invited here more than in Salvador. But that is alarming me because if I live here and I'm a U.S. citizen now, I need to do more and I need to learn more. And more people like me, they need to know more as well because we live here, we work here, and we have our families here. So I'm practically being forced to learn more about politics and policies and how that works and how that affects my community and myself. Not only because I'm a trans person, but I'm HIV positive. I'm an immigrant. I'm a former undocumented. So I've been in all this intersection that affects our community. So I know firsthand what is going on. But I don't know what happened in the field. I've been there. I've been talking with senators. But then I'm like, what am I going to say? I only know how to speak from my heart. but I don't know. I don't have an academic background, so for me, it's really hard to start a conversation with a politician that has a long history, academic or whatever. And so a person like me going to the Hill need more preparation to continue fighting, because I fight on the streets. I'm very good doing rallies and raising my voice. Soy bien bocona y metida. Me encanta ser meticha porque sí aprendo más, but I need to learn more. And I'm very thankful for Jesse. Jesse has taught me a lot. And he always tell me, like, come here, please come here, join this meeting, join this and that. It's hard for me because I don't have a salary to do my volunteer work. And I had to survive, to pay my bills, my home, my car, and everything, to be able to continue surviving and supporting others. So how I can combine all those things to continue fighting with the people over here. So I think that's a question for me and people higher than me that have more leadership position. How can we support people like me in the community, in the hood, and where we don't go? I don't see more people like me here. Most of you, all of you have an academic background. You come from other states. Where are my people from Landiaport? They might be U.S. citizens as well, and they can vote. How can we teach those people? How can you help me to do my work, to help you as well to do your job?
Yeah, Are we better or worse after the intern?
First of all, I want to just thank everybody for being here, for inviting us, and I want to say how much I appreciated your comments, Alexa. I feel like, I do legal work and policy work, but I feel like, I started off doing community organizing, and that's where the heart is beating, and I feel like it's so important. It's such important work, and it's what really shifts public opinion and gets the work done at the end of the day. Without that work that's being done by you and people like you or that are on the ground in our communities, the work we're doing is just in an ivory tower. So it's and I think that there could be a lot more interrelationship. If you ever want to learn more about policy work, please, hang out with me for a while. I'll take you. I'll bore you to tears, and that was community organizing for sure. And then just, if you don't mind, maybe I can answer like where we are with trans rights too, because I feel like that's a really important question. And I feel like I've been doing this work for about 10 years, and I feel like we have made tremendous strides as a community in the last 10 years especially. Even 10 years ago, it was really hard to change your identity document in Oregon of all places. And almost everybody excluded transition-related care. And now there's over 20 states that won't allow insurance companies to have those kinds of exclusions. And almost every state, except one, allows you to change all of your identity documents. Most of those states allow you to do it without having to have surgery. So there's been great strides, and we've had great strides in growing public acceptance of transgender people, in my opinion. People like Buchert, Cox, and Janet Mock have really paved the way for people and for more visibility. But along with that, in my opinion, I don't want to speak for everybody here, but along with that has come backlash, because the growing visibility has created, a target in some ways, and unfortunately, it's a perfect storm, because in my opinion, it coincides with what I believe is this rising authoritarianism that we're seeing in some of the places where the anti-trans legislation is coming from. And whatever the causes for that, it could be, the folks living in those places, feeling their country's changing and they don't recognize it. And, there's growing diversity, there's growing urbanization, there's, a lot of different forces impacting those communities. And I feel like there's, they don't like it. And they're wrong, because we've always been here, we're always going to be here, but we're an easy target because, it's an easy, and it's a little bit of a tipping point. And I feel like they really targeted trans people as a way to bring it back to 1950 or whatever the goal is. That's never going to happen. But, I feel like that's the objective. And, and we've seen that in the actual implementation of policy. We've had just last year, we had over 200 bills that were introduced targeting transgender people, and some of them passed. A lot of them, there's now 18 states that prohibit trans kids from participating in sports in accordance with their gender identity. we're suing in a lot of those places and we're winning. And there's like 5 different victories now in the courts on that issue. But there's also repeated attempts to prohibit kids from getting access to gender affirming care. And we're suing in those issues too and winning. But it just shows you that this is a special moment. Unfortunately, it's a really hard moment for our community. And the rhetoric is just, even when the bills don't pass, they have a really negative impact. Even positive places, they have a really bad impact on our community. So, but we're a resilient community. We've been through, we've always been here. We've always been dealing with discrimination and harassment, and we will come through this and we will be victorious. But I'm not going to sugarcoat it, though. It's a very difficult moment. And as far as the election goes and the impact that has had, I think that there's some good things and there's some really bad things. Good things are that, there were at least 3 openly trans folks that were elected to state legislatures. Montana, Minnesota, New Hampshire. This isn't Oregon and California and DC, so I just think that's really huge. So that's the good news, and a lot, and showing in the way that the way the country voted on election day, I think shows that there is no tolerance for this, extremism, election denialism, or whatever you want to call it. So, that's the good news, and I think that trans rights are part of that. But I do think that, unfortunately, I talk to anybody in this work, well, I'm just looking for the dark side of any silver cloud, but I think that people are going to be looking to what happened with the Trump-DeSantis split, and they're going to be looking at DeSantis as a role model for what they want to do. So I believe we're going to have more attacks against when DeSantis is mentioned in any conversation, the first thing that's raised is the "Don't Say Gay" bill. That's the thing that he ran on, and that's why he's widely known. And I feel like that's going to be a model for a lot of really far-right folks that want to introduce similar legislation. And because of gerrymandering, a lot of these folks that are running in these places don't have to appeal to the center anymore, and they just turn to their far-right folks. So I think that there's just a whole lot of work to be done leading up to the next legislative session, and a whole bunch of work to be done to shift public opinion. And this conversation is a part of it. So thank you.
What is the current status of transgender rights, and are we better or are we worse because of the election?
Big question. Well, yeah, and first of all, I would echo the thanks all of you for being here today. I know it's a very pretty fall day outside on a Saturday, and instead you're in here to participate in this conversation. So appreciate everyone and people tuning in on the live stream too. Again, my name is Rodrigo, or Rigo for short. I'm with the National Center for Transgender Equality. And in terms of what is the midterms and the state of trans rights, I really agree with Sasha that this was progress, and progress comes with backlash. So I'll say the micro and the macro. So micro of just immediate with the outcome of the midterms. On the federal level, meaning Congress and Senate, we don't entirely know yet because a few races, I'm sure are still waiting to be called. In Georgia, there's a runoff. But we're more or less net neutral. Like, more or less, things didn't change that much, which shocked a lot of people because there was an expectation that Democrats would lose a ton of seats. And unfortunately, we're at a point where Democrats are really the ones that support our issues. Hopefully someday that won't be such a partisan issue, LGBT rights, but it is still now. But a lot of Democrats held on, and so, it's razor-thin margins no matter how it goes, but it's not huge change. And so federally, it's kind of net neutral when it comes to LGBT rights and trans rights in particular. But where we really made headwinds was in governorships. Governor races get less attention than federal races, but they're still really important. And a lot of governors who were supportive of trans rights were attacked in their election races for being supportive of trans people. The opposition set these mailers, maybe some of you have seen it, that were squarely attacking elected officials because of their support for trans people. There were these mailers that went to something like 20 different states, specifically targeting Latino voters, among others. This is very targeted effort to try to make trans people a wedge issue among voters of color, and specifically and especially Latino voters. And these mailers really villainized trans people. It said basically you should vote out this governor, your governor, because he or she
supports trans people being able to get health care. But most of those governors were able to hold on. The public didn't, the voters didn't actually fall for it, including Latino voters. And I mean, I know that my home state, Florida, we really messed up. I'm so sorry. That was a pride, feel your pain. Those states did not go the right way. But Latino voters in most states did, and Latino voters and voters in generally did vote for Democratic governors who supported trans people in those key states where that was really a big thing. And one example is Kansas. In Kansas, there was a governor who had vetoed, the Kansas legislature had passed anti-trans bills, and the governor vetoed it. So it was only thanks to the governor that those did not become laws in Kansas. And then she got villainized because of that. These mailers went out. And her opponent was very, very much running on a campaign of anti-wokeness. The Republican candidate was very emphasizing school issues, including going after trans kids in schools in particular. And so the fact that he lost and the pro-trans governor won in a state like Kansas, not exactly a liberal bastion, is, I think, really, really important. But then on the macro level, to zoom out from just the immediate midterms and kind of overall, I would really echo that framework Sasha laid out of progress and backlash. So I won't go too deep into that for the sake of time, but progress is always met with opposition. That's not unique to trans people. That's just how social change works. When a community has been marginalized and then starts speaking out and starts getting wins, other people get pissed. There's always going to be, progress is not even and just like straightforward all the time. Instead, you make progress and you get pushback, and you make progress and you get more pushback. It's an uneven process. So that's where we are with trans rights. We're absolutely making progress, but that also makes the opposition even more upset. And actually, our victories make them go after us even harder. And that's why we're facing this dual reality of making progress in bills and laws and legislation, but facing more violence than ever. Where the rates of murder of transgender people, especially transgender women, and even more especially Black transgender women, are going up, not down. And so it's really this weird combination of making progress and actually getting attacked at the same time.
Yeah. One other thing I wanted to but my old boss used to say that you always should +1 to courts whenever you're having a conversation. And I just want to emphasize how much is at stake with the Senate. They are the ones who are appointing lifetime appointments to the judiciary. And in the last administration, the Trump administration packed the courts with really rabid anti-trans folks who are issuing rulings now in Texas that are rolling back, seeking to roll back protections for trans folks. And so I fingers crossed in Nevada, and I'll be, going down to Georgia to do everything I can to move that. I just want to make sure that I clarify how much is at stake with the judiciary and the Senate.
Absolutely. So Sasha, our second question, we'll start off with you. What is the next legal threat to the transgender community at the state level? Emphasize that a little bit.
Yeah, I think we're going to see more of the same that we saw last year. I think they really honed in on, if people are following Florida, what's been happening down there, but there's been an attempt, step back. So last year, I think they're really going to go after gender-affirming care for trans youth. I think that's going to be the biggest attack that we're going to see next year. There's already been a bill introduced in Tennessee that was introduced pre-filed. Their legislative session doesn't start till January, but it's a bill that was, written by their majority leaders from both houses. So it's something that they're taking very seriously. They're going to push very hard. And, all of the bills, even the ones that have passed, have been litigated, and they inevitably make arguments that are completely at odds with science. They just, throw things out there that are completely, it's just like the election denialism. They just throw, they can say whatever they want in a legislative hearing, but under the white hot light of a courtroom, it's a lot more difficult. So they've been losing, thankfully. I don't know if that will always continue, but I think we're going to see a lot more of that, more attacks on gender-affirming care in the state houses. I think we're going to see more athlete bans. I think we're going to see bathroom bans, identity documents. I just don't think it's going to, I'm sorry to be Dr. Doom with all of this, but I just think it's real. I mean, it's just the way the country is right now. And we're doing everything we can as an organization, as a community to fight back, but we really need help. I'm talking to you all in this audience right now and everybody that's watching us. This is such a pivotal moment. And these folks are coming for our kids, and it's just really important that people stand up and show allyship at this moment. So I think those are the legislative attacks that we're going to see. But I also want to underscore the violence. It's a continuing and increasing violence targeting transgender women of color in particular. It's just heartbreaking every year to see the names and stories of these folks. And I also think that there, is looking at what happened to, Speaker Pelosi and her family. I think there's this just increased violence, whether it's, a result of the, hateful rhetoric or, the device was, I don't know. But if you just last year in Pride, there was, a van full of armed folks going to a Pride festival, and we saw, drag queen story hour on a donut shop get firebombed in the last couple of months. So I think that, it's likely we are going to see more violence. So I'm just deeply concerned about that as well.
Thank you. Rodrigo, so, what do you feel is going to be the next legal threat to the transgender community?
Well, I agree that we are going to see more and more attacks in state legislatures of bills that squarely target transgender youth. A lot of the groups that are anti-LGBT have figured out that the way that public opinion is becoming more and more accepting of sexual orientation issues, let's say, of people being lesbian, gay, bisexual, so on and so forth. And support for marriage equality continues to go up and things like that. So the anti-LGBT groups who hate that are thinking, okay, how can we turn that tide back? How can we lower support? And they figured out, let's go after trans kids. They really figured out that the public is a lot less familiar with what it means to be trans than with what it means to be, anything about a sexual orientation. And they figured out, unfortunately, that the public is even less comfortable with someone who's really young realizing that they're trans. The public still doesn't really accept that a kid could know their own gender and that a kid could really make the choice to go on hormone blockers and that be the responsible thing. So all of these bills are going after trans youth in particular because the organizations that ideologically oppose all LGBTQ rights see this as their way in. They're going after trans kids because they're trying to go after all of us. And trans kids are the most vulnerable. So I think that's going to continue, unfortunately. I think the opposition is going to keep trying to introduce these bills all over the states, and that's going to continue to foster more hostility against, anyone who's different, really. And I'm really concerned that violence is going to keep escalating because of that, because it just makes it socially acceptable to hate somebody. If you have elected officials who are supposed to be leaders going after a population of people, going after trans kids, it sends a message that it's okay to attack other people, that it's okay to attack your neighbors and their families. So I think that's going to go up. The good thing that I take a lot of heart in is that trans people all around the country are fighting back. Yes, we're being, yes, thank you. Yes, we're being attacked, but no, none of us are just letting that happen and throwing in the towel and letting go. Instead, people are speaking out even more vocally and really getting more and more and more involved in activism. Like you said I know more about politics here. People are speaking up and getting involved. And that includes young people. I wish that no young person felt pressured to get involved in activism. I wish our world was just safe enough that they didn't have to think about it. But in this environment where they are being attacked, they're still coming out. And then they're going to show up in state legislatures and testify at committee hearings and everything. I mean, trans people in general and trans youth especially are getting involved. And the more we do that, the more public opinion actually turns our way. Because time after time, we see that when the public does get to know us, then they realize there's nothing to be scared of and it's all okay after all. So, it's still worrisome because people are going to be attacked in the meantime. And so that's why you have to keep fighting. But I take a lot of heart in that our community is fighting back, and the fighting back is worth it.
You're on the front lines. You are out in the streets, doing what needs to be done. What do you feel is going to be the next legal thread for the community?
Creo que la amenaza más tremenda somos nosotros mismos. He visto peleas en organizaciones luchando por el poder. And instead of fighting to each other, we need to come together and do some work. Yeah. Because we already know what they mentioned. And so I think we need to go to an action to do a better job. A lot of people doesn't know that a trans immigrant person, it will not be affected for this loss or might be in a limbo, because they will be like, if this will affect me or not, especially in healthcare, because we're not only going for affirming services or affirming healthcare, we're going for other things. And so we need to put attention to that and to educate the community. It's very important for the community to know what is going on, because every time that I see a rally when our rights are under attack, only white trans people come. It's a few of us that come in the front and say something. So we need to use our social media to call for everyone to come and speak their voices. I see a lot about trans immigrants coming here and apply for asylum. And normally they stay with an asylum because they don't know what the next step is. So for people outside, they can be as a permanent resident in a year. In 5 years, they can be a U.S. citizen. And use those privileges to do a change in the community, because all the taxes are in the community with the politician where they live. And some of the people don't know that they can vote. Like, for example, in Maryland and Hyattsville, if you are undocumented, you can go and vote and to elect those people. But there's a lot of fear for people to come out and exercise their rights. So we need more information to pass in the community.
Thank you. So before we get to our last question, I know we talked a lot about transgender youth and the attack on youth. I work in education. I work at a community college. I know one thing that we've done is we've provided students the opportunity to connect with their faculty, their advisor. Let's get your name changed in the system, right? But it's only within the system that's used on campus. It's not the main system through the district office. I know that that's our next step as an institution that we're trying to rectify. What do you feel we can do as individuals that do work in education to help the youth to continue to feel comfortable in a space that they spend the majority of their time in? They spend more time in school than they do at home. COVID made that very different, but post-COVID, we're returning back to schools. Do you have any advice for those individuals that are in the world of education or going into the world of education on what they can do to help, the transgender youth?
Again, I think information is key. And funding. We need more funding. There's a lot of people want to change their name in the system, but it's hard because in PA County, most of Maryland, because the filing application is $165. Got $50 to do the announcement in the newspaper. So that's some money that some people don't have. And so we are calling people to come and vote, but what we don't know is the trans people don't go to vote because they don't want to take the ID out with a name that doesn't reflect their gender. So how I'm going to expose a trans person in that with that example to go to vote? It's hard. So, and it can be mistreated. It can be an act of violence just for being who they are. So it's very hard. So here in Maryland, as a trans Latinx CME, we support people to go to the courthouse and file an application for a name change, and we pay for that fee. But we don't have a lot of funding. So we need more money to do those things. And information where to go. Like with my Walker and trans law, they also pay and support people to do the process.
I have just a couple thoughts. One would be to, make sure that the schools has a policy in place, that clarifies that students can use restrooms consistent with their gender identity. That's usually a really big issue for kids. Having, a gender neutral restroom available. It doesn't have, not one that kids have to use, but, for folks that are non-binary that might not feel safe in either. I feel like that's really important. Having a even pronoun policy, I think, there's a lot of things, and there's model policies that I'm sure but one really important thing I think is the use of images. Speak a lot. Pictures says 1,000 words. They say, in having a picture of Sylvia Rivera in a classroom alongside other pioneers sends a very clear message, and that's the kind of creativity that, sends it. For a trans kid like me back in school, and I saw that, I would recognize that this is a safe place, that they see me, so that's just some thoughts.
No, thank you.
And to expand on the IDs issue, I think, and Nate listed, I think that's really important. And it's a great thing to tackle in education because usually schools do have control over their own system of IDs. Like you said, it doesn't fix the issue for all the other parts of where a person's name is listed in their life, but to at least make the school system navigable and accessible is really, really significant. It's at least a starting point. One part of that that's often forgotten is names on transcripts. You may very well have a student who went to the university under one name, they graduate under that name, and then they transition and change their name. Well, if then they're applying for a job where they need to prove that they have that degree, or if they're applying to grad school and they have to submit the transcript, that transcript is going to show their old name. And that's going to out them as transgender in a way that, in a situation that might not be safe. It might literally cost them the job offer or the grad school acceptance. Now, it shouldn't, but it is, that's real, right? Discrimination happens. So part of the process that's often forgotten about in university settings is to update the policy so that when a student has already graduated and changed their name, they can go back to the school and say, hey, I changed my name. Can the transcript update, reflect that new name? That's really, really important for, at a minimum, protecting that person from anti-trans discrimination when they have applications out that are really high stakes. Another part is the school email address. So kind of like you alluded to there, students often use their school email as their main email, even for non-school stuff. And so making sure that email address can be updated with the name they really go by is huge. And then thinking about gender in dorm room assignments for students who do live on campus. Usually the default is that whatever gender is listed, M or F, for male or female, you get assigned a roommate that has that same letter. But if you're trans, that letter might not be how you really live, right? If you're not binary, that M or F box is certainly not going to accurately reflect who you are. And for some people, it might not actually be safe to have a roommate who's a stranger at all. If you're trans, that person could harass you, and it's really scary to have to live with someone who doesn't even accept the validity of your gender. So for some students, depending on the campus, it might be worth it for that. It might be safer for the trans student to not have a roommate. And that gets met with a lot of pushback because that's seen as favoritism. Other students might say, I don't want a roommate either. But if it's a matter of safety, we have to take that seriously. We can't worry about, the special privileges argument if it could really be a matter of keeping someone from violence. So thinking about dorm room assignments and making sure that there's a real policy where a trans student is able to say, hey, that M or F box on my driver's license or my state ID, that's not really who I am. Who I really am is this. And let's figure out the right dorm room assignment.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Rodrigo, we'll go ahead and we'll start with you on our third question. What advice do you have for local LULAC councils who are advocating on behalf of the transgender community in rural areas in the United States?
I love that question. I mean, because so often there's a stereotype that trans Latinos especially don't live in rural areas, that we must be in like San Francisco and New York and that's it. And like, that's not true. We live everywhere, just like anybody else. I mean, I would say 3 things. One is to get your state's report from the U.S. Trans Survey. So the U.S. Trans Survey, the USTS, is a study that NCTE does every few years with Translatina Coalition and many other organizations. That is really the only source of data on most parts of trans people's lives. All of this other research that is out there, even about the LGBT community, often doesn't break out trans people. So we often have had a hard time being able to prove that discrimination even happens, which we have to be able to prove that in order to pass legislation to help stop it. So that's why we started doing the USTS. And the really great thing about it is we're able to do a report on every single state. So even if you live in a more rural state like Wyoming, we have that information for you that proves what trans people are experiencing in Wyoming. The survey is actually out in the field right now. So if you're trans, I really encourage you to fill it out. It's at ustranssurvey.org. Or if you're not trans, still promote it. And we need more and more Latinos to fill out the survey. The more Latinos complete it, the richer the data will be. That's especially important for people who are in rural areas. If we get enough rural respondents, we can do a breakout report on just trans people in rural areas. And having that data, it might sound boring, but it's really a game changer. It really makes elected officials listen to us so much more when we can prove that we live in rural areas, that we live everywhere. And then another thing people can do is to your point about voting. If you know a trans person who's nervous about voting or is eligible to vote, go to the polls with them. Be a buddy. All of us feel more confident if someone can go with us and someone who's a friend, who's trusted, who can have our back. And we know that makes a lot of trans people who otherwise would have stayed home, then actually they turn out and they do actually cast their ballot. So literally just the buddy system, pair somebody up so that nobody has to vote alone. And the last thing is you were saying earlier about, I'm not an academic. Like, what do I say to these politicians? That is so real. People struggle with that all the time. And I would say you're just speaking your story is already enough. That actually is really, really powerful. That's often more persuasive than statistics, depending on the person. So don't ever feel deterred by, I don't have a degree or I've never done this before. That's okay. You just showing up and being like, to an elected official, being like, I live in your district and I care, that's already powerful right there. So if chapters, especially in rural areas, can help make people feel more comfortable speaking out, no matter what their background is, that would be really, really impactful.
Thank you. Yes. So Alexa, what advice would you have for some of the councils out there who advocate on behalf of the transgender community?
Creo que más que abogar en nombre de ellas, sería traerles a ellas para que hablen por sí mismas. It's very important for us to be there. Subdiversity is a powerful tool. And if LULAC or any other organization wants to really advocate or support the community, bring our community, don't use us as a token. Bring us, educate us, and support us in many ways. It's very hard because there's a few Latinx organizers in the DMV area, but we can create leaders, And so I will advise that to LULAC or any other organization to open to the community, but in a welcoming environment. Many of these meetings are in English, and some people don't be comfortable. Like I remember when I started here, it was really hard for me to just listen and don't say anything because I was afraid to say something not appropriate in my broken English. Now I don't care if you don't understand. You don't get what I'm saying? Go to Google. Might be helpful. I used to apologize for my accent. I don't give a fuck now. But it's hard to get in power because we have this old trauma from our countries where trans people have to be silent or we don't exist in El Salvador. Every time that I go back there, I use my U.S. passport because I'm afraid to use my El Salvador documents because Alexa doesn't exist in El Salvador. So all those trauma to come here are real. And so many people like me, and maybe they don't have a U.S. document. So they're hide. They hit us up. We need to come to bring these people here. So that's what I'll advise.
Thank you. Thank you. Sasha.
Oh, this is pretty basic, actually. And I think, I'm struggling a lot with the way that trans people have been othered in the world. Like, even within our own community, it's not always animus-based, but people, even in the LGBTQ community, it's like transgender is like this mysterious other thing, and I just don't understand it. It's so confusing. And I really would urge us to not think of us as a them, and try to whenever talking about trans people, don't talk about us as individuals as cop speak, so just call us as people or workers or whatever, but also just, contextualize trans people within communities and families and schools and, workers, instead of just like this other thing, to whatever degree is possible when talking about trans people to policymakers or in the community, bring them into the fabric of the community instead of like this other mysterious, it's not always ill-willed. It is a lot of times, but, it's to whatever degree possible, is bringing it into the fabric of our lives rather than this other thing.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, I want to mention the surveys in Spanish.
Yes, thank you.
It's very long, but please encourage people to fill it out. Or if they don't have a computer, préstenla de ustedes. If they don't have internet, or if LULAC can have a survey party, so bring people together. It's very hard, pero es importante.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. It's true. Fully bilingual, English and Spanish. And it's open to everyone who lives in the United States, whether you are a citizen or not, documented, undocumented. You do not have to be a U.S. citizen to take it. It's if you live in the United States, you can fill it out, or on a U.S. military base, you can fill it out as well. And it's open. It was going to be open until November 21st, but we're actually about to extend it to December 5th. But that's still only a few more weeks, so it's a very limited time. But yeah, if you could please promote it. A LULAC party is a great idea. We can help you with that. We got templates and resources galore. But yeah, ustrandsurvey.org.
And not a problem. A group of us were talking about how can we incentive the community via raffle, something, or gift card, something for people to come into it.
Yeah, there's a sweepstakes. For legal reasons, we have to call it a sweepstakes, not a raffle. I don't understand why, but apparently that's a thing. But yes, there is a sweepstakes, so people can win $50 gift cards.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We open up the floor to any questions.
Yes.
How can we make LULAC councils, more inviting and welcoming to attendees? And I said this in regard to my team leader when here in Arlington, Virginia. And one thing I found is I can't speak for a Canadian partner. I have to bring them to the table so they can speak for themselves, right? How can I, the local chapter, say, I need you on my team? Because you have to speak. And my team needs that. It's that space. Now, how do we do that?
I think talking to them will be the first thing, and what resources they need to come to your meetings. For example, I live in Baltimore. The meetings are here in D.C. So for me, it's very hard to travel because I work from home. But I'm privileged to have a car, so I might be able to come. But some other people take the public transportation. Believe me, it's not the same for a trans woman to go in the public transportation. So just think about that. Maybe your council can give a Lyft car or send a ride or something like that, because our life is very tough. And so especially for trans women, because not all of us have the privilege to pass in society. So we are very obvious sometimes, and that put us in danger. So disability is like una espada de dos filos, so we need to take care of our sisters especially. So as for what they need, it had to be like, Jesse pays my duty, like all the fees, all the things that I had to pay, he does for me, and I appreciate that because I don't have money. I spend my money supporting my community. So that's what they need.
Yeah, I would really echo that. And about Lyft in particular, Lyft has been a big supporter of many LGBT organizations, at least. So if LULAC hasn't reached out to Lyft, I would say reach out to the company and be like, hey, can you sponsor us and give us some free rides? That has worked for other organizations. Honestly, I don't work for Lyft, so I can't make promises, right? No guarantees. But I would recommend trying that because you might be able to get some free ride credits so that you're able to offer that resource and it doesn't cost LULAC any money. And might as well try Uber too. I don't know. Try them all. And then another thing is I would say proactively reach out to trans groups and say that you want people to get involved. That might seem obvious or simple, but because the world is generally so hostile to trans people, we might assume that if something doesn't straight up say that they want trans people there, that then we might have a bad experience and we don't want to risk it. So making it really explicit and going out of your way to like even just post in some local trans Facebook groups like, hey, I'm from LULAC and we'd love for trans Latinos to join or whatever. That simple gesture sends a really strong message, and it kind of lets the person know that they can feel comfortable, that it wouldn't be a risk. So I think just reaching out and making that proactive contact can go a long way.
Yeah, 100%. So, Vinny.
But yeah,
Would you like to add in?
Oh, I was just saying that, I don't know else to add to, but maybe Zoom, like the hybrid meetings, are sometimes helpful and reaching out. I mean, I need to practice what I preach, but I feel like it's really important to show up, for other communities, and in that sense, it's a really strong message, and there's trust that's built.
Thank you. Myself, yes, yeah, no, it's not really a question. I just had a couple of comments. One of them, Alexa, girl, you make a political statement by just opening your butt door and walking out your butt door. So say that you're not political, say that you're not savvy. Don't be that thing. Because as soon as you walk out your door, you are making that statement. And so when you walk into somebody's office or whatever, you are the statement. It's your story. And antagonize, own them. And I know that you do. The other thing is, we accidentally in San Antonio butt heads with the trans community meeting that they were having. Their meeting was scheduled on the same night that the LULAC meeting is scheduled. And so what we did was to join forces, and we had a joint meeting. And then from then on, the Pride Center said the meeting will be held, the community meeting will be held on this night, and it's also available via Zoom. And so that really opened up to a lot of other folks. And that was just by sheer accident, but it was a good accident. Yes. Tu camisa dice DFB. Yes, DFB. BC made it at the thing. Forward carried. We're back in the Department of Order. I know. Do we have any? Yes.
It's more like that questions more like in statement is that as a privileged access people, we need to be tangible allies. We have to support it. It's like what you said earlier. They said all of you stated is that when you guys going to allied the office, not too late or stay late. Our probably isn't great. There's some nature for that. But also as cis people, we need to be their allies, and also we need to support that. And we're Colombians, right? So, I see or I hear so many times how it's in other people just Poland and money for party is it simple things that go a long way. There's a thinking less. It's again weird.
Right. I think we have time for one more question. Okay. If not, thank you so much. We really appreciate all of your wisdom, all of your, your stories that help change the world from what, where we're at right now. But yes, I just, again, thank you so very much. We really appreciate your time and sharing space with us to help continue to educate all of us here, within the LGBTQ plus community and the Latinx community. So thank you for your time. Thank you guys for attending our session here and our panel.